When I started to get ready for this video, I thought I would make like a nice little tasteful purple eye look. I was feeling purple, so I thought just a little bit of purple. And then it was a little bit more purple. And then I'm like, it's looking a little one-dimensional. Let's add a little bit of black to blend into the purple. And then it was looking too, asymmetrical. So then I'm like, oh, I'll put a little bit of underneath my eye to match the top of my eye. And then that's how we've ended up with something a lot more than I had initially anticipated. But it's too late to reverse now. So we're just going to rock with what could be the most intense eyeshadow look that I've ever done to date. And so why not capture that for all of time and sit in front of a camera and talk for an hour? So anyway, welcome back to this channel. My name's Kate. I talk about books here, and last month I mentioned that I'm unemployed. And I thought that it would just be 1 month of unemployment. Well, actually, I thought it would just be a few days of unemployment because somebody said they'd give me a job, and then they actually said, no, we're not gonna give you that job. So I was like, okay. So then I found a different job. And then yesterday morning, they're like, actually, we're not going to give you that job. So this is my first month of unemployment, and who knows how long that's going to last. The last time this happened, it lasted a year and a half. So the first month of this new period of my life, I read 10 books. And that feels like a good use of my time. To be so for real, I'm getting lots of nourishment in my enclosure by reading my books and writing my novel and going to the beach and just chilling. Obviously, I'm applying for jobs too, but this is just something we're working with. So if anyone's wondering how did she read 10 books, or they're thinking to themselves, why can't I read 10 books? That's because you're probably have things going on. You probably have a job and responsibilities and life and dependence. It's for real. Just me in this apartment with my husband, and he works the night shift, so I get a lot of time by myself. I thought I would do something new for this video and rank the books based on how much I like them. Usually I'm going in chronological order, but I thought, let's be crazy and start with the book I hated the most and end with the book that I liked the most. Unfortunately, there's not a lot on this end of the spectrum, but hopefully I can be interesting enough, dance monkey dance, that you'll stick around for however long this video is. I'm sure it's some ungodly timestamp because I don't know how to condense my feelings. So we're gonna start with something that I hate to start with, because my mom did give me this book. And because from time to time, we like to buddy read together. We usually like to buddy read something that's speculative, something that's like maybe a little weird. We like to do a mystery or a thriller or a horror, something like this. Because if there's one thing we love to do, it's speculate. I mean, it is the national pastime of women everywhere. And so she was at, I think it was either the Strand or Powell's, 2 different coasts, 2 different bookstores. Anyway, she's looking for a book that I recommended her, and then some bookstore employee or shopper, I don't know, approaches her, stops her on the street. Woman, you must read the Midnight Library. And my mom says, all right, sure, let's be crazy. Let's take a book recommendation from a stranger. She had never heard of this. I had heard of this. And I had been intentionally avoiding this, not because I anticipated anything negative about it. It's just that I have this disease of the mind where if a lot of people like something, I go, no, thank you, that's not for me. And I'm trying to get better at it. So honestly, I went into this open-minded because I know that this has had a positive impact on a lot of people. The concept of this book is that a woman attempts to take her own life and then realizes that the space between life and death is a library. And she is guided by this being who takes the form of her childhood librarian into picking up books from this midnight library to explore what her life would have been like if she had made other decisions. And so in this way, she's able to explore all of the regrets that she has in her life. My initial worries of going into this was that it was going to be too precious and too predictable, because you hear that concept and you kind of immediately know the ending. You can skip forward to this part if you want, but like any person who has 2 brain cells to rub together can tell that obviously she's going to look at all of her regrets and realize how futile they were, superfluous they were, and that she's actually where she's meant to be, and she's able to go back to her original world with a bit more knowledge and confidence. That is obviously what the book is going to be about, and I was okay with anticipating this ending as long as the journey was worthwhile. Unfortunately, the journey sucked. I hated almost every single page of this, and my mother was going through something at the time. So on our FaceTime calls, I couldn't, be my full bitch self. I had to be a bit more gentle and a bit more diplomatic. And so, Mom, I know you're watching this. Sorry. This, I just really was a chore to get through. It was such a slog because it's so repetitive and so simple. And these two things really compounded into just a massive headache for me. Because what she does is she picks up a book, and here's the thing, she's plopped into the alternative universe, and she has no knowledge of who she is and her place in it and who are these people around her. So there's this initial, what could be initially kind of humorous of, who are you? Where am I? Gosh, oh gee whiz, like, who are you and what can I say next? Kind of bumbling idiot kind of routine, which was okay the first time. It happened, I swear to God, 20 fucking times that she doesn't know where she is, and she's such an idiot, and she can't even make any kind of observations about context clues, and it was just so annoying and felt so clumsy. Like, I just wanted to get through the part where she's doesn't know where she is so we can finally get to why she's there and why it's wrong for her. It just felt like this thing we had to keep tripping over and over again, and how repetitive it is. And furthermore, we're stuck in the same routine with writing that is atrocious. I mean, truly, the writing in this was laughably bad. He took 100 words, what anyone else could have said in 10 words, and he would oftentimes, page after page after page, repeat himself and hammer you over the head like he doesn't trust me to get what he's trying to say. Like he thinks I'm an idiot. I'm not an idiot. I read the back of the book and could see the whole thing rolling out in front of me like a road. And I know where it's going. You don't have to patronize me and tell me exactly how the character thinks. And honestly, even like after all of this, like the formatting of it and the structure of it and the writing of it, all of the technical aspects of it are lackluster. But even the spirituality and the meaning you're supposed to harvest from this, I also didn't feel like lived up to any kind of expectation. Because here's the thing about this girl. She has a lot of regrets because she never follows through with anything. And she's a coward. She backs out of relationships and friendships and career opportunities and sports and music and travel opportunities. She can't do anything. And this isn't a story of, I was a musician and I wanted to know what it's like if I was a swimmer. She didn't become a swimmer or a musician. She became a nothing person. Not that you have to achieve some kind of great career success or financial success or any kind of, or operate in what society views as success and wealth in order to feel successful and wealthy in your own life. Like, all you need is love, etc., etc. She doesn't even have that. I mean, she has no ambition and no dream. She was completely uninteresting to talk about, to think about. None of her decisions really made sense to me. I found her annoying. I found her to be so stupid. Like, and of course, stupid people rights. Stupid people should have rights and dreams and live happily ever after if they want to. However, I don't want to read about it. I don't want 300 pages of a stupid girl who can't do anything right. And honestly, there were aspects of the mental health commentary in this that I also felt to be a little icky. Like, the best universe she finds is the one where she's not taking antidepressants, as if taking antidepressants is an indication of a problem and not just a medicine someone takes to feel better, the same way someone else would take insulin. It just felt really weird to me that you need certain things in order to be happy, and one of those is perfect stellar mental health, I guess, or the idea even that you can cure depression, that it's your fault for being depressed and all you need is to turn your head and see a different outlook and see, oh, the grass is always greener, or you're gonna have regrets, but you're right where you need to be. Like, it's just a matter of outlook, and you can say these platitudes and these beatitudes to yourself in order to make yourself feel better, and if only you did that, then you won't be depressed anymore. I feel is really condescending and a gross misunderstanding of what depression is as a disease, as a state of mind, and as like a really complex sea monster of the brain, and we're just simplifying it in a way that I find to be detrimental. Like, I fear that, I mean, it's great that some people have found some really value out of this. I don't really trust you to give me any advice or make any worldly observations, but good for you, I guess. And it's just that I really feel like there must have been so many people who read this and were disheartened by the conclusions that the author made them draw. That antidepressants are a bad thing, or they try looking at things from a different outlook, but they're still sad, and now what? Like, it just feels really empty and hollow and insulting to my intelligence. And I ultimately wasn't challenged by this. There are like a couple lines here and there that I felt like were interesting and wish could have been expounded upon, like, what is it? The only way to learn is by living. But ultimately, I just felt like the book was too repetitive. We were just doing the same thing over and over again, bad writing, and I didn't understand what the point of that was. So sorry, Mom, that you had to sit through this, but you were in no place for me to give you this. What is it? 10-minute and 42-second rant before. And it just feels so good to get it out of my system. And I do realize I'm starting this video with a really bitchy opinion about a very popular book. And if anyone's made it this far, that would be a miracle. But this is my truth. This is my truth. I read books to find meaning, and my mom reads books for escapism. And so for her, this book was just like, yeah, let's live a couple different lives and whatever. And because she, was going through house selling stuff, which is a nightmare, and so it was just nice to escape for that. To escape to that for a couple hours a day. So I imagine if you're in kind of like a beach reading mood, or if you're not as much of a picky bitch as me, maybe you get some value out of this. I just personally would skip it. I think there's a much better book about the afterlife called A Short Stay in Hell, and that's about hell being a library, and you have to find the book that perfectly summarizes your life, both in content and grammatically, and it's completely delirious, definitely a Twilight Zone episode, so skip that, pick up this, and I don't know, book a therapy appointment. So I just spent the first 10 minutes-ish of this video kicking the shit out of a very popular, beloved book, and I'm about to do it again. I'm not here to make friends. I'm in no position to be out here not trying to make friends. However, I have to live my truth, and my truth is that Project Hail Mary the book is bad. It's a bad book, unfortunately. I want to preface this. I liked the movie, so therefore it's not rotten to the core like The Midnight Library was. I think there is something in this book to be harvested and turned into something better, and it has been, which is great. So definitely see the movie, which I will get to, but if you don't know what Project Hail Mary is, it is about a amnesiac, how do you say that? Amnesiac astronaut. An astronaut with amnesia. He wakes up on a spaceship, he doesn't know who he is or why he's there, and then suddenly he realizes that his mission is to save Earth, to save the universe, perhaps. And so then he goes on this science-y adventure trying to do just that. Andy Weir writes a lot of these high science books. He also wrote The Martian, that was turned into the Matt Damon movie. And so I was expecting, again, I was kind of expecting a bit of a Twilight Zone-y thing of astronaut, doesn't know who he is, has to use context clues, figure out why he's there, save the universe. Lots of science. I like science. I'm not mad at science, of course, but unfortunately, pretty soon into this book, I realized it was not this that I had in my head, which I don't think is my fault because I read the back of the book, okay? If I read the back of the book and draw a conclusion and then the book refutes this conclusion, I don't feel like that's my fault. I feel like I want to call up the marketer and berate them. So I was expecting astronaut knows nothing, therefore we know nothing. So let's put it all together. On page like 5, immediate flashback to give us context. I didn't like this. I wanted a little bit more mystery, and I feel like we were instantly being spoon-fed backstory. And anytime there was tension, the tension had no opportunity to build or create some kind of physiological response in me, the reader, before it was just deflated by some lame flashback. And the flashbacks were constant in a way that they would be in a film. Do I go on another tangent? Oh, I can't resist. Okay, so before the age of film, flashbacks never were a thing in written media. They were never really a thing on the stage. This is like purely a cinematic storytelling technique that have been now adopted by other mediums because every reader has movie brain, and that's okay. I'm a cinephile, but you're expecting the reader to have movie brain, so you can do things like flashbacks without confusing anybody. And so having a flashback in a book is not inherently problematic, obviously. It's writing your book like you would write a movie, or imagining it like a movie, or anticipating it becoming a movie. All those things are the issue. And that manifests in the writing of this. Hi, jump scare. I'm editing this and I'm not sure I'm getting myself across. So I think what I'm trying to say is that by using very cinematic storytelling techniques in a novel, I find that to be kind of a misunderstanding of the medium and a little disrespectful of the medium, because in a novel you use certain techniques and in a movie you use certain techniques. And so when you're using movie techniques in a novel, it just doesn't feel very novelesque. It just feels like, oh, The Martian did really well, so I know this is going to become a movie, so I'm writing it anticipating the adaptation. It's just how I felt. And so there was kind of this sense of arrogance to me, and maybe I'm just reading a little bit too far into the intentions of the author. It's just that I find the novel as a storytelling medium to be very precious to me, and I feel like there are certain do's and don'ts and like a constant flashback, and you'd have to read the book to understand that these were like very movie-like flashbacks. They were not regular old novel flashbacks. It was, and then I remembered this, and then it's this whole scene, and then he's like, wow, I can't believe I just remembered that. Like really, like he would zone in and out for the flashbacks the way a character on screen would zone in and out of flashbacks. It was not natural at all, because obviously you can flashback in a novel, but you just do it by going there. You're not announcing a flashback, or you're not announcing that you returned to the flashback from the flashback. So that's what I'm saying, is that I just don't think he respects the novel and the rules. And so I want him to follow the rules. He was writing everything so like move by move. It's like he was just like describing Grace, the astronaut, doing every little thing. He floats here, he puts his hand on doorknob, he turns doorknob, he looks, I float over here, I type this into the computer. Just like really, like he would imagine what Ryan Gosling would be doing in the movie and then types it out literally word by word on the page. It's almost like if I was telling you, oh, I made a PB&J sandwich. Instead of saying that, I said, I put my knife in the peanut butter jar. I turned my wrist. I slathered peanut butter on the bread. And then I put my knife in the jelly jam jar and I spread the jelly on the bread. Like really so mundane and boring, and again like a chore. Like, why are you describing every little thing? Like, you know this isn't a movie, right? You know you can summarize. You know you can say things in short sentences, that you can refer to things that happened in the past, that I don't need to visualize him walking down the hallway. You can just say, he walked down the hallway. You don't have to have these really long sequences that again suck all the tension out of the book. This book has the least tension, I think, of any book I've ever read, which is insane because it wanted to be tense. And it's made worse by these long heavy science sequences, and I knew that this was going to be heavy on the science, and I consented to the science. However, that was just to excess. Like, I liked it in the film, I liked it in the Martian film, but it was just too long in these, and there were... Do I mention this? It felt like a spoiler to me because I wasn't anticipating it, but it's in all of the movie marketing, is that he has, some minor spoiler, a little alien friend, and it's kind of like a buddy movie with him and the little alien friend. And so he has these long conversations with the little alien, who's called Rocky, and it's like, I have this on my planet. I have this on my planet. Do you know about E=mc²? No, that's crazy. Do you know about this? No. And this is what we do. And that's what we do. Like, really, for pages and pages and pages about, like, comparing science on two different planets, which I felt didn't serve the story at all. Like, this is a narrative. Can we chop and get to where we're supposed to go? That being said, I would throw myself in front of a bus for that little alien guy. Definitely the movie version of the alien, I wasn't that attached to the book version just because I was irritated with the writing style, but I feel like the best parts of the book were the relationship between Grace and Rocky and this, like, interspecies companionship. So overall, I don't think this book was like a total lost cause. It was just more frustrating that I could see a good story within it, but it was bogged down by bad writing and bad editing, probably. And so that they were able to take the core of it, especially the core relationship between Grace and Rocky, and turn it into such a fun blockbuster movie, I find to be great. And now you don't have to fucking read this. You can just go watch the movie, which I enjoyed. And actually, this was going to be a buddy read idea between me and my mom, and famously, we hate every book that either of us picks for our two-person book club. So, like, thank God I didn't read this with her, because she also would have found this really dull. But I just want to know, when will the curse lift? Who did I betray in a past life that every book I read or want to read with my mom is bad? Like, is there a grandmother I have to carry to the top of a mountain? Is there some goat I have to sacrifice at the bottom of the mountain? Like, what do I have to do? I'm on my knees. Okay, now we're gonna move on to a book called The Director. This is something I was really excited to read, but books always come out in hardback first, and I have to wait like a year for them to come out in paperback, because what am I, made of money? New, this would have been $28.99. I'm not paying $30 for a hardback, but somebody like was already selling this used outside of a bookstore for half off. So it was $14. I thought, oh, I wonder why they couldn't have liked it. That's crazy. This is a book completely made for me. What a miracle it is that I'm able to find this for $14 and read it, and I don't have to wait for the library to get it, or to find it somewhere in a used bookstore, or to wait for the paperback. And I actually would like $14 back, please, because this, wow, was not at all what I thought it was going to be. This tells the story of G.W. Pabst. He was a German director, mostly working in the 1920s and 30s in silent films in Hollywood, and I'm really interested in this period of Hollywood history and all of the European directors who escaped Nazi Germany and World War II, either before, during, or after, and continued to make films in the US with kind of like a European mind, and sort of looking back at the way the continent was and what happened, like this relationship of especially Jewish directors and what they did in Hollywood. I'm thinking especially of somebody like Ernst Lubitsch and his like films that take place in like fanciful European settings, and maybe he's mourning a little bit of the way Europe was, and then later on he would make films like To Be or Not to Be, which is explicitly about Nazism and the war. And so I'm just interested in those kinds of people. And I hadn't seen, have I seen any G.W. Pabst? Hold on, I'm Googling. I haven't. He's done things like Pandora's Box, Diary of a Lost Girl, The Joyless Street. I am interested in seeing these. And so this is the story of Pabst, and he was actually going to visit his mother, I think, in France, and then war breaks out and he's stranded on the continent for the rest of the war. Based on a true story. And so I didn't get a lot of the Hollywood experience like I had anticipated. I didn't read fully the inside sleeve. And you know what? That could be on me. I just feel like we didn't talk that much about movies, and we talked a lot more about war, I guess, which I'm down to talk about, obviously. There was something that wasn't doing it for me in this book. Like, the writing was really cold, and it is translated from German, and so I know that I'm not like blaming the translator, just sometimes the language has a certain quality to it that when translated doesn't translate. I'm not trying to call the Germans cold, but the writing of this book was. And honestly, I only read maybe the first 2/3 of this and skimmed the last third and just caught up on Wikipedia, because honestly, I got the same fulfillment out of reading a Wikipedia article as I did reading this. I just felt it lacked character and personality and interesting writing. It just all felt really dull to me, unfortunately, and that is such a shame, because I really want to like this. This is like one of the cornerstones of my personality, is obscure cinema lore, and unfortunately this wasn't it. But I'm sure somebody else is gonna pick this up, either because I sell it online or donate it to a used bookstore. They're gonna be like, how could someone have donated this and given this away? And then they will want their, what, $7 back? Does it go down 50% every time? So that's how I feel about that, unfortunately. Okay, so this next book that I read is There Is No Meant to Be by Jared McInnes. I came across this book in a unique way because my local English independent bookstore was putting on an author event. This guy came from Marseille, he's American, then he lived in Britain, and now he's living in France. Get back down there, you sneak. It was a great event. I wish that I could listen to every author talk. I want to like go to every author event where they talk for an hour and then I read their book. For me, that's my ideal way of reading it. I don't want to separate the art from the artist. I want to know all about you. I want to contextualize your worldview into your art. I love it. I found it really interesting. And I think without that author event, I'm not sure what kind of relationship I would have with this book, because I was just taking his anecdotes and putting them in context of this, or remembering something he said and reading it in here and kind of understanding what he was trying to accomplish and then deciding if he did or not. And so that was kind of a fun, unique experience. I don't always get to meet the author and then read their book, and also it is signed, which is cute. Its little subtitle here is a memoir, and then they cross it out and they call it a family story. And I think on the inside, yes, memoir crossed out, a novel crossed out, a family story. So it's autofiction. It kind of exists in the space of fiction and nonfiction, as he tells the story of his life and his ancestry as like the seventh son of a seventh son, going back many, many generations until Ireland or Scotland, and this like generational chain of abuse that was ultimately broken by his mother, who has this like gift of foresight. And when he got in his car accident, she like felt something was wrong. Like, she just knew that something had gone wrong even though she was miles away from the accident. He also talks a lot about how after the accident he uses a wheelchair, and so this book will talk about the accident and disability and family and children and partnership and all of these things. And I picked it up because I'm interested in these like generational stories, especially ones that break cycles of abuse. I think About Betty by Tiffany McDaniel is one of my favorite books of all time. It's definitely in the top 5, and the author's mother is actually called Betty, and this is kind of a semi-fictionalized story of her life breaking that cycle of generational abuse. So this is something I'm interested in. However, I gave you the book the way it was pitched to me in the author event. However, it just kind of wasn't that, unfortunately. It was non-linear, he was jumping around a lot, and you got the sense that within the page, it was like all of time was existing all at once, and he was reaching in and picking whatever relevant memory there was at the time, and there's really no rhyme or reason as to why we're doing this and then doing that and then talking about this, which reminds me of that, which then we flash forward to this. And I don't mind something non-linear that runs around like that, but I just need it to have some kind of internal engine, some kind of urgency, some kind of rhythm that motivates me to pick it up, and also that I feel a rhythm to the book and I kind of feel where it's ending. I have a conclusion at the end. I think that there's a musicality to literature that is important to me. It's something I try to accomplish in my own work. However, because of this nonlinear approach without an engine or a rhythm, it just felt a little disorienting. However, I am endeared to this book for several reasons. The way he talks about his wife/wife character was great. She's really compelling, the best part of the book. I found it to be really funny at times. Yes, he was really funny, really clever on a sentence-to-sentence level. I thought it was really well written, well articulated. I loved the dialogue of it. There were aspects of this book that inspired me in my own writing, and honestly, he was talking about his writing routine, about leaving the house for 2 hours a day to write in a cafe or library, and I started doing that, so I feel like this book has affected me positively, but only because of my relationship to its origin, being the author event, and I don't know if I could recommend this to anybody because I wouldn't know who to recommend it for, and like without the context of meeting the author personally, I feel like a lot of its idiosyncrasies are lost. The next thing I'm going to talk about is One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This. This is written by, I believe, an Egyptian journalist in response to what is happening in Gaza. The author was a war zone journalist for many years. He, I think, went to Guantanamo Bay 8 times to report on the happenings there, and he has a lot of professional and personal experience relevant to the genocide and the war that's happening in Gaza at the moment, and I was really attracted to this book because of the idea of Western apathy, that in the moment people will tend to look away out of self-preservation or misunderstanding of the situation or honestly believing propaganda, and then later on will claim that they were always against whatever issue. I mean, we can see this in things like, for example, I often think about or like interrogate my own liberalism, I guess, or progressivism, and put myself in historical times and what would I've actually believed and what would I have actually done. For example, I think there are so many of us that if we actually lived during the 1960s civil rights movement, wouldn't have been on the street marching like we think we would have, because we're not on the street marching now. And what things would we have believed about Japanese immigrants, and would we have not cared about internment camps? And if we really were living in Poland in the 1930s, I don't think very many of us at all would hide Jewish people in our basements. I think that there's a sense of retroactive bravery or fantasy bravery when really we're humans like anybody else and anybody can believe in propaganda. So he talks a little bit about this in this book, and he also talks a lot about like who do we consider human and worth saving, and what things are we willing to tolerate or look away from. And so there was lots of really moving parts of the books, and honestly it was challenging in the way that it was harrowing and graphic, that I really struggled to pick it up day after day because it was just a lot to be reading about. You know, children and babies being murdered, hospitals being bombed, etc., etc. And it was just like a lot and really heavy. And so therefore it's kind of hard for me to discuss my feelings about this book, because in terms of writing, I feel like it could have executed its themes better, specifically by talking about less things. I feel like the topics jumped around a lot. Like if you felt I was a little scattered in my trying to pitch it or talk about my motivations for reading it, it was 10 times as scattered, and I feel like it could have benefited from being trimmed. And it's already so short, but I would oftentimes be reading it and feel like I don't understand the relevance of this chapter to the overall whole of the book, and that kind of, for me, made it difficult for me to grasp the purpose of the book in general. And all of these, if I'm supposed to take away 12 things, it's kind of hard for me to take away anything at all. And then something else I neglected to mention, hi, me again, I neglected to mention that the way the book made me feel was really solemn and sorrowful. And obviously, the author doesn't owe me any hope at all, especially when the topic at hand is so brutal and unforgiving. However, I feel like when you're crafting a book like this, especially with a title like this, you want it to feel like a call to action and you want to connect to readers in a certain way. And the best way to do that is to inject a sense of hope, or here's what we can do to change, or here's one thing that is at least okay about this situation. Like, you have to soften the blow slightly in order to get your message across more effectively, in my own personal opinion. And so for this reason, I was just really struggling to see the point of dragging me, the reader, through all of the gore of it without having something at the end that I feel like I could change my life, or through conversation change the lives of others. So at the end of it, I just felt really kicked, and I wasn't really quite sure what I was supposed to be getting out of it, besides here are all the ways that everything is awful. And that's, in the current day and age, I already know everything's awful. So I think it's just it's a toughie, huh? So I have therefore like a complex view of this. It's very well regarded in online book spaces, and I do think that it is worth reading, and I think it's very important to be challenging your ideas and to be reading things that make you uncomfortable. And so I don't regret reading it, obviously. I think that it gave me a lot to think about, and I just think that as a piece of writing itself on a technical level could have been improved, and that could be due to the fact that it was expanded from a tweet. That's how I feel about it. Kind of complicated. I think there are, or maybe could be, other books that I could find more useful than this one. So I'm gonna get to Googling. In a drastic change of tone, we're gonna once again talk about astronauts. This is Orbital by Samantha Harvey. So this is about, I believe, 6 astronauts as they orbit the Earth, and it's like one day in their lives, and one day is 16 orbits. It's meditative, lyrical prose that goes through their duties on board, their relationships to the Earth. At the same time, there is, I believe, a typhoon that's about to crash into the Philippines that they're watching helplessly from above. And so it's like just kind of meditative little vignettes about what they've going on. One astronaut is mourning their mother, and things like this. And I was really impressed by the observational skills of the author and how she was able to put herself into the shoes of 6 unique astronauts. And obviously she hasn't been to space, and 99% of the readers of this will not go to space. And yet at the same time, you do really feel like you're in the spacecraft, and that it is really detailed and down to earth, and it really feels realistic. Like, you really feel like you're there in a very impressive way. Like, I'm impressed in the research that she had to do for this, and I'm sure she conducted many interviews in the way the body feels in zero gravity, etc. My motivations for reading this is because it won the Booker Prize over James, and that really upset everybody, and nobody wants to talk about that anymore because it's been a year. And yeah, I think James should have won. I think that this was perfectly enjoyable. Kind of my version of a beach read, where it's, you know, meditative, casual, not super pressing or urgent, but still has that rhythm that I was talking about before, you know, as she goes through all the different orbits and what's going on. So yeah, fun, cool. I picked it up for a couple dollars. If you can too, I'd recommend it. And it was nice, pleasant. Next, we're going to talk about The Pearl by John Steinbeck. I am a certified John Steinbeck lover. I think this is my 6th or 7th Steinbeck. Like, I just really love him. I love his prose style. I love how he works with allegory. I like his settings and his characters, the way they feel like fables. And so I was really excited to read this, which is one of his more famous novellas. This is about 100 pages. It is about, I think we're led to believe that he's indigenous, that he's an indigenous fisherman. I think around in like Baja, Mexico, maybe. It's all kind of, it does read like a fable where you're not given his exact race and location and age and all this stuff. You just get this sort of vague understanding of this character, but we're led to believe that he's indigenous, middle-aged, living in Baja, Mexico. And he discovers this huge pearl. I mean, it's like massive. It's basically like hitting the lottery. The main message of the book that people discuss, and it's even mentioned on the back, is greed and like how wealth corrupts. However, for me, it's a book about power. It's about how when you're like systemically oppressed in a flawed system, that even like literally winning the lottery can't make an impact on your life, because there's issues with the people who want to buy the pearl. They're gonna like, they don't want to buy it for what it's worth, and then what does he want to purchase with the pearl is just an education for his son, but who is going to educate him, and then he becomes educated, but then what, because there are only certain jobs that he's realistically allowed to have in a society, and that there are structures in place that can prevent a man from being free, and they're not just monetary. And while you can maybe interpret like, oh, they're talking about greed because of the greed of others and the fear of others as they try to like take the pearl from him, etc., is like, could be a cautionary tale about wealth and the way that wealth corrupts. However, it just really stuck to me about just a systemic oppression, and that nobody talks about that when talking about this book is a little baffling to me, because I mean, you look at what this man wants to buy, and it's an education and a baptism and a wedding. And those are just like basic human desires, and that he is not even granted those, I think is really telling. I definitely would recommend picking this up from the library, or maybe there's a PDF somewhere. It's an easy read. There's pictures, and so it's really like a compelling parable, and I think it is inspired from a Mexican parable I may have heard, and it could have been just expanded upon. So credit where credit's due as to wherever the origin of the story came from. One of the reasons I really like Steinbeck is his descriptions of nature, and like just these lush, beautiful images, and the animals and the foliage, and if you really like that kind of thing, it's in abundance in this book. So that's my like simple-ish review for a pretty enjoyable classic. Definitely worth reading, and I'm glad to add it to my Steinbeck collection. One of my goals this year was to reread. I think I wanted to reread more last year, and I reread like 3 things. So I like made an effort and I actually reread something this month, and that's gonna be the first 4 books of poems by Louise Glück. She won the Nobel Prize in Literature, and I read this, I think in 2023 maybe. It was a gift from a friend because Glück visited her where she was studying at Notre Dame, and she thought of me, bless her, gave me this book. I devoured it. I really liked Glück's poetry. It had an impact on my poetry. And then the thing with reading poetry is that it's not like prose. You can't really remember plot points and things like that, which makes it kind of inherently rereadable, that you could recapture the emotions that you had almost for the first time again, because you can't memorize all of the poems in here. There's no spoilers, you know what I mean? And there were elements of her poetry that I remembered liking, but I didn't have any specifics to draw from, and so I decided to go back into this and actually make little tabs so I can revisit my favorites, and I found it to be so worthwhile. I really like her poetry. The Nobel Prize in Literature judges praised her work for her unmistakable poetic voice that with austere beauty makes individual existence universal. And so her work has this kind of visceral quality to it, and these really unique turns of phrase. They're really impactful, and I have like a physiological response when I read them. Like I think at some point, I can't find it, she like describes the moon as throbbing in its socket or something like that. Like really, I can't think of a better word besides visceral, of just describing like nature with a really like a corporeal sense, and describing relationships with really a brutal sense, and that she's really not hiding from the reader at all. It's really vulnerable, which does make sense that I would like it because of my love for confessional songwriting. like Joni, like Taylor, for instance. And reading this gave me like a little spurt of poetry myself, where I wrote a couple in tandem by reading this. And I definitely am going to return to this over and over. One of the ways I write my own poetry is I pull a poetry book off the shelf, flip to whatever tab I've marked, because almost all of my poetry books have these tabs, read the poem that I obviously liked enough to put a tab there, and figure out why I liked it, and then try to recreate that feeling in my own words. And so doing that has been really helpful, and this is going to be something I return to, I think, constantly. Getting to the end here, almost, I'm going to talk about Half His Age by Jennette McCurdy, which is a book that everybody is reading and or complaining about right now. My leg just hit the table. Jennette McCurdy wrote a memoir a couple years ago that like the whole internet was goo goo gaga over, including myself. I thought it was really impressive. It's called I'm Glad My Mom Died. It's about her being a child actress and her abusive relationship with her mother, and the way it was written was really stunning, because as time passed in the book, like the beginning chapters where she was a child, the writing style was childlike with simple structures, and then as she aged and also understood her situation more with adult eyes, the language itself became more adult and more complex and more introspective. And so as I was reading it, I was like, oh my god, she really understands the craft, and I know that she has to be writing more. And so I was really excited to read this, because I think that she understands something about writing that not a lot of other actor turned writers do. I wanted to read this because last year a book that had an intense impact on me was Lolita, and I read Lolita because one of my favorite books of the year before that was My Dark Vanessa, and that book is referenced a lot in the other book. So I'm just interested in this subject of grooming, predatory relationships. There is something about this topic that really intrigues me. I also think about that memoir, Consent. There's something that like really draws me to this. It's not quite morbid fascination. It's just that, you know, almost every female artist has a song about how they were in a relationship with someone who was far too old for them, and they basically were terrorized or whatever. You think about Dear John, you think about Vampire, you think about Mature. I'm in a pop sphere right now, but you can really go everywhere. That this is just like a common feminine experience. And I'm just interested in dissecting the feminine experience. And so I was warned that this would be dark, and I would warn you that this is dark. That she does go into specifics about how this girl was groomed by her teacher, and it is framed as girl seduces teacher, but of course the book is proving to you that that's impossible. A minor cannot seduce someone who is an adult. That's just not how brains work. It's not how society works. It's not how morals and ethics works. And so it is disturbing, and then it does go into a lot of like sexually explicit places. However, if you have read either My Dark Vanessa or Lolita or both, this is not as deranged as those two for me personally. So let's talk about the writing a little bit. I couldn't really connect with the tone of the narrator here. It was very sophomoric and vapid, and I mentioned how much I liked her writing in the memoir, to imply that she has control over the tone of her writing and the word choice, that she really understands how to craft perspective to fit the narrator that she's speaking through. And so therefore this sophomoric vapid tone, I can realize is on purpose, because it was obviously a creative choice, because I know she can morph her style. However, I still couldn't really get into the narration. There was just something keeping me from truly enjoying it. And I'm not sure what that is, because I have liked kind of bratty narration with something like Boy Parts. So I don't know. There's something in the narration there that I wasn't like really connecting with. Other parts of the writing that I just felt like fell short a little bit was the way like she was stating the theme or the message very plainly, and there wasn't a lot of subtext, or there was like the message was stated very plainly in some ways, and then other themes were left into the subtext in others. And I feel like that's why a lot of people are having a very confusing reading experience, and that it's really polarizing because they're taking a lot, because there's a lot to harvest here about not just the predatory relationship, but also this girl's relationship with like capitalism and power dynamics between the rich and poor, classism, consumerism. Like there was just a lot here. And honestly, the book feels more like class commentary or commentary on how like consumerism and capitalism destroys your brain, and she's decided to tell that through the story of a predatory relationship. Like this was just the setting for this other thing that she wanted to say, which isn't inherently bad. It just makes the book a lot to ingest. The reason this book is up so high is because it actually was really engaging despite all of that. It kept my attention in a way that was really like compulsively readable, and you just want to keep going, like oh my god, what's gonna happen next? I think it also brought a lot of interesting conversation about how like there's no such thing as the perfect victim, and that like allowing and encouraging inappropriate behavior with a minor is just as bad as like inciting it right off. And I think that in this like canon of predatory relationship fiction like Lolita or My Dark Vanessa, this has its place in the conversation because of the way that the narrator's not this perfect victim. So ultimately, I feel like it adds something interesting about victimhood and about worth. So that's how I feel about it, and it is up so high again because of how captivating it was, and that I will keep thinking about this book. And whereas a lot of the other books on this list, I just won't really be thinking about later. So, and I also enjoyed watching all of the videos online of people talking about it because I love being engaged in an online discussion when it's happening instead of like a year or 2 or 5 after it actually happens. Guys, I'm losing steam. This is the last book we're going to talk about today, and it is Good Material by Dolly Alderton. People love Dolly Alderton on the internet, and I hadn't read anything from her. It also has to do with that disease of my mind where I'm like, if everybody's reading it, I don't want to read it. But I picked this up at a book swap, and the person said like, oh, it was fun, you know, it was like light without being vapid, which is exactly what I was looking for. So this is like, it's an anti-romance. It's the story of a heartbreak, and it's about a man who was dumped, and he doesn't know why he's been dumped. And the whole book is him kind of spiraling, like having this like pathological crisis about what the hell is wrong with me, what did I do? And he spends a lot of time in misery, maybe about 50 pages too long in misery, but still it was engaging, and it was kind of fun, and it was funny, and reminded me a lot of like High Fidelity by Nick Hornby. That sort of pulpy but still substantial and fun and interesting and compulsively readable, and everybody feels like a real character. And I'm not often rooting for a man on the wrong side of a breakup, or I'm not often rooting for a man in general. I'm not often reading about men, to be honest, but she made him so pleasant to read about, and that like, yeah, he's fucked up and he doesn't know why his girlfriend dumped him. It's inherently a red flag if you don't know why you've been dumped, but yet he's still endearing. And he does this thing where he keeps smelling her perfume because it's such a popular perfume that he goes into the drugstore and buys all the perfume and throws it all in the river, because it's like, okay, that's 12 less times or 12 less opportunities I have for smelling her perfume on public transportation. It's like little funny, chaotic things like that. And ultimately I'm endeared to the message of sometimes people love each other but shouldn't be together, or that just because a relationship ends doesn't mean it didn't serve any value or didn't have any value. And it does end with a chapter from the ex-girlfriend and her perspective and of the relationship and the breakup, and it really ties everything together. It's about relationships. I definitely love calling it an anti-romance, and I just had a great time. And I'm gonna definitely read more from her because I like her style. And it's one of my favorites of the year so far. I really think that this was a blast, and I definitely need a warm and fuzzy like this from time to time, while also being thoughtful and, you know, making me think about the world and modern relationships, etc. It's definitely for fans of Sex and the City, perhaps. It's got sort of a similar vibe to it. For me. Or maybe that's just because I'm currently rewatching Sex and the City. I just dropped my phone, so this is me post phone drop going, it's not cracked. Everything's fine. Yeah, everything's fine. So thanks for watching this video. Thank you for letting me rant about 10 books that I read in my first month of unemployment. And I'm gonna have 10 books for you next month, I'm sure. Hopefully my makeup hasn't been that disturbing to look at. I feel like I'm overthinking it. And so yeah, this was fun. See you later. All right, bye. Okay. You gotta get out of here. Please. Please. Oh my God. Bye.